Can a realization of great compassion be developed from a realization of the renunciation and then used as a cause of the renunciation with this to become the cause of bodhicitta? 가르쳐온다? 인중근열라 전주 인지기에 얘래 심지기 그랬어. 네네. 그래. 디 인질 땐 그래로 더 림버도 딘스라 림버기 이슈스라 저거도 컨트롤 라고 해도 저는 직송다. Okay. Here's a question. Can a realization of a great compassion be developed before realization of the renunciation and then used as a cause of renunciation with these two combined becoming a cause of bodhicitta? The great compassion said that what is the difference between great compassion and compassion? Can somebody answer? Yes, please. Teach the way. You have that somewhere? Okay.
One is for all sentient beings.
One is for all sentient beings.
The other is not necessarily for all sentient beings. 3 possibilities.
So that's your fault. How did the other time was some misera? Yeah. Tamusum Ningji da Niji Shimbuni Musum Islam Re. 다 무슨 인서나 다 니가 임베 모두 야우체체 다 닝지 인라是吧 무슨 닝지 가서 닝지 친구 다 무슨 시도 오늘 제제제 다 강강 캡슬로 you start the business so you have to finish.
I would imagine that compassion pervades great compassion.
닝지 친구라 디켄사실라 말해 그거 할래? 맞다. 그거 가서래 닝지를 니 신부 접세. 알래요. 닝지 친구를 닝지이나 닝지 친구 임be 맞접스. 가르쳐서나. For example,
that story you told the other day, the person took the lice off the head of that woman and said, Ningche, Ningche.
okay.
Put this in a place where it won't die.
Okay. 다 닝지 전부 저거디 땅 다디 여고도 닝지 전부 제베이나 아니 이지 민지 미국 심전 참말로 미지 아니 동예 전적이 삼부게 오르베스
If it's great compassion, it has to be directed at all sentient beings with the wish to free their suffering or to liberate them from dukkha. Yeah.
So, like the example of this lies. That is that example of the story. This example of this story is compassion, but not a great compassion, isn't it? Right? So, because it is one lies, and are you going to say this is not a great compassion?
Just because the object is one, is it louse?
Laos.
Yeah, singular. If it's just one louse, is it louse? Singular?
Laos.
If it's got just one louse as its object, is that why it's not great compassion? The one that you said. You are answering though.
I will say yes.
다 개치셔디 그 찍了다 다시 쉬 마당비나야 삼로치 당비나 샘진 찍了미니 아니 그래서 우리 샘진 찍이 동행을 미니 아니 닝지 전부 게 요래요 말이지.
Can you have great compassion that has as its object one person, or like the suffering of one person? Can it be great compassion with that as an object?
I guess I would have to agree with this, because Buddhas do work for the benefit of one Laos, and so they do have one Laos as their. But my intended meaning was merely one Laos.
Merely one Laos. So when you're saying merely one Laos, it's not a numerical thing. When you say merely, you're eliminating something, right? So you're not trying to imply that it's numerical one sentient being. Is that what? The compassion that you're talking about is the reason why it is not great compassion, because it has as its object just one thing.
Okay, I'll give us the reason. It's not great compassion because it doesn't have all sentient beings as its object.
Then it's the same, no? Can you have great compassion with one sentient being as its object?
No. No, I'll say no.
말해도 봐. 더제상가 닝지 첨부 인비기 체디 미고 샘제망고 유버 지부 배진 셰유지 말했어.
Probably even when you say great compassion, what makes it great, it's unlikely that it's just because it has all sentient beings as its object. It's probably not enough.
어디라? Personal responsibility to liberate them?
The difference between compassion and great compassion is that with great compassion, you yourself take responsibility to free them from that suffering, or yourself take responsibility. Yeah, yourself take some responsibility.
Take responsibility is that how some did we?
다 하삼도 차고.
다삼로 와.
다기 껴버 차고스 내면들.
나? What?
Not yet laksa.
Oh, not yet. Okay. 저장 인지 친구들이 준비 명하고 등기 낭로려야 기온도 준비 참 quality 요래. This is the we really need to know. right?
In that sevenfold cause and effect thing to generate bodhicitta, where is great compassion? Where does it fit in that scheme?
Which number? There's like 7 causes. Equimitis.
Tangyo.
요 말봐. 디난 당뇨 말봐.
Tangyo the yogamar.
요 말이 디나 요 말에. Equimity is not in the 7 causes and effect. My teacher one time he was telling, for a long time these 7 causes and an effect, these way of the lineage. Normally he's thinking this is to generate bodhicitta. But then when he go through Lamrim Chimo very carefully, these causes and effect is specially designed to generate the great compassion. This one's on. Read again this one. So the fifth one, there is a compassion, the fifth one. And then the fifth one, not only just the fifth, but the sixth is the special intention of altruism. What's that? Altruism. 제장 저디 남샤준도 닝지 첨부세디 라섬 제뉴기 닝지들고 그랬어. 근데 아주 견제명아 된게 나는 닝지들라 자위 닝지디 남샤준도 가지고 계시 닝지메베치 라섬 제뉴기 닝지고 그랬어.
So it's not, when you talk about great compassion in the sevenfold one, you're not just qualifying it by itself the way we were doing, but it's great compassion when it has the ability to generate or the ability to develop into altruism.
딜람나 아니 간저디 가서래 chanju simgi gyula chanju simle gyul donyegi ningji de kande ko residi ningji chasang ro mares 가르치는서나 dundi simjin tamje dungye da thewa da ge chawo nyambe lo namge wa tene sonde ani chanju simgi gyu tang ajo nyelen sonro songo wa di doya de wo tene ngo zu yo res de songo sure.
So not all generations of compassion become substantial causes or transform into bodhicitta. Only the ones that have within them the determination of wanting to do something to alleviate the state of sentient beings. The moment you have that kind of mind, then you have the kind of compassion that can transform into bodhicitta.
Marshe ten so yon chambata pena junde menga dungi nalo na majo ale di inda khasota debate sundo jimbi chebina ani nyarangi gyula nyarang da jumbi gyula ningji yore se ningji cham khaware se de junde menga dungi nan ige padon roshabina khasore 자외 닝지 라섬 제뉴기 닝지도 요 말에 닝지 봐도 요래서나 다 junde menga dungi nan to japsadi 닝지 거도 잡샤 이네디 라섬 제뉴디 매비인자 아니 녀란다 좀바디 gyulaya 닝지 첨부요 말에 닝지 체매요 조그래 가르진스나 강기 규제명아 둥기 정말 마르심바 텐템바 텐소가 이왕고 잡아 정말 계사래 이나양 당도 딩예 차고 냐베 로고디 게라 산제주 고마마도는 딩마송 세디요 말이와 디기다 라섬 제뉴 세디 내가 좀 차기 줄이스.
In that sevenfold, when you're talking about the sevenfold cause and effect generation of bodhicitta, when you talk about, if you want to do it in a debate format, you can consider it in terms of when there are arhats, who are Shravaka Pratyeka Buddha arhats, and when they generate what we call immeasurable compassion, when they generate immeasurable compassion, if you try and see till what state of that sevenfold cause and effect they can go to, they can have recollecting, knowing that all sentient beings have been one's mother, recollecting their kindness, wanting to repay it. And what's the next one? Huh? Okay. That one. That fourth one. They can go all the way till there because they can know that all sentient beings have been their mother. They can remember their kindness. They can recollect their kindness. They can wish to repay their kindness, and therefore, as a result of that, they can recollect them in what? Loving. What? Isn't that a shorter? Okay. So you can love. You can see them in the light of loving kind, whatever that is, that. But because their wish will never transform into, I want to do something about it, it doesn't go and transform into great compassion, because great compassion has to have within it the ability to naturally generate then the wish to do it. So because they can have all of these states that are developed, which we call immeasurable compassion, but they don't have that wish to want to do something for sentient beings, it only reaches the fourth one. And that's why the reason why they don't have this is because the wish to attain Buddhahood arises when you say that you want to do something for sentient beings, and they don't have that wish to attain Buddhahood. So they might have done all of those, but that lacking of that wish means that their compassion doesn't turn into great compassion.
Da digin du tangi da kurangi tangi tamje cheban na shin simjem chigi che mebal mi ya la tang meba mi ya che meba mi ya de nyaranda jumbale yores yena yang denjigi 닝지 che meba mi 닝지 che meji ge chobar ma do 단도야 닝지 친구 요 말이 세디 미국 즉 야치 중 계지 좀 많이 봐 아니 닝지 친구 세야 되라 아니 심진 탐지에서도 잠배 얘는 초와지야디 동행 전되게 넘버 진슬도 잠배 동행 디던디 동행 심진 컨트지 힘배 있나요 진짜 찌기 된다래 있나요 아니 얘기 배 같이 가서 그래 저기 effortlessly 시그러봐 배주 숙좀 맞된 배관에 코란리아 된체버지 최고 냐배 로게지 맞춘 거 봐도 배진 딜레이 니게 전부 지금 말했을랍나 저랑 좋아하는데 지도스.
So if you take your earlier position, then if you consider these Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha arhats, they can generate, or they do have this immeasurable compassion. And the immeasurable compassion does have an immeasurable amount or an infinite amount of sentient beings as its object. So it doesn't seem to be the case that distinguishing between compassion and great compassion depends on how many beings or the number of beings that you can fit into the object of that mind or that mental state of compassion. But rather it seems to be more tied to the conviction that arises from having seen the suffering of other sentient beings and generating the strong wish or the determination that even for one of these sentient beings, come what may, I want to attain a state where effortlessly, spontaneously, in the most appropriate manner possible, I can do something about alleviating their state. So it seems to have more to do with the kind of drive that underlies the mental event than the number of beings that you can fit into its object. The distinction between compassion and great compassion. Sorry, so if we said that, what would you think? How would you reply?
I would have to accept.
Okay, I won. Now, so common mistake we always make, like when we say great compassion, immeasurable, our focus is more on numbers, more people, more followers. But we always forget that the focus, the real focus about compassion is, I think, to get rid of the suffering. So to get rid of the suffering of yours, renunciation, get rid of the suffering of others, compassion, that I am willing to do it for everybody, whoever, I don't care about who they are, but whenever they have this suffering, I fully, voluntarily, pure with pure intention, highest intention, I'm going to do it. Then, where I think we will struggle the most, it's not about all the sentient beings. In order to take one sentient being to get out from the suffering, it takes so much energy of yours. We say very easily, but it's not that easy. Even you cannot fix your own problem, and then making a commitment to yourself to fixing other people's problem. Sometimes, when it becomes too early, then it becomes like chudo. Chudo karsire. I don't know. Chudo is if you're putting nose on other people. What do you call it? So people say it's none of your business. So yeah. Many of us, when we just go through the flow of, we say, practice, dharma, and then chanting, we go with this kind of wind, energy. Oh, so good. But when we come on the level of practice, being practical, then where we struggle is to, if you sit with one friend and you commit yourself that I will fix my problem, I will try to give a best example to others, then you fail so much. So then I think where we talk about the when we say spend special intention, highest intention, which is the number 6, and then that number 6 connecting to the number 7, bodhicitta, and saying, in order to get this highest intention, I need to get the Buddhahood. Buddhahood sirve for myself. That is the only solution. So this answer, as even we say the result, the 6 causes, and then the 7th one is the result, isn't it? This is the answer. So we don't need to say bodhicitta is the answer, but we say in order to become Buddha is answer to all the 6. That answer, even arhats might agree, but they are not willing to do this. But that is a very different subject. But the most important is somebody asked the question here. Renunciation with the two combined. Yeah. So we really need to know what kind of compassion or renunciation brings the bodhicitta. 그 저들 랭겨를 겨말이냐. 고름 따디로 알레레. 요리 저장 때 닝지 전부 다 인중 셰베나 간조 정보 셰베나 인중년 기억으로 봐. 그러봐 인중년 기억으로 해서 인중 기억이 슈라 아니 간조 인중디 당아조 단도 셰베나 소소 가져 수수역이 동네들 텐데기 삼로대당 타바도 동네를 대하게 탐람도 세워지 시부지 차왜 갑라 아니 인생권도 타바 되는 로든이 쉽게보다 냠도 안 남존 남손나로 송번나신 인생권도 타바 되는 로지게바이나 디슈들라 전주심께 탑시 쇠베이나 그래서 아주 단다 지름부치기 남존 남손기 림버틱단디 인중 문에 지난 인중 송사의 슈고라 동니 송고에 되지 요르데 이내 전주심 우주연을 송야데 알한조 슈geb사데 동니디 임바치라 아니 가르치도 슈geb고에서도 다다 신이게 된다라 아니 동니 통고도 세디.
The question seems to be asking more whether the order or the way in which you generate them, if renunciation can be preceded by great compassion and then these two can be used to develop bodhicitta. But the way it's presented is that first one generates renunciation and only then you can have great compassion. And the reason for that is because until you have a strong conviction within yourself which wants to be freed from suffering because you've identified it well and you have some clarity or you have certainty with how you can go about doing it. So you've identified your suffering and you know that you can get out of it. And when this becomes a strong, inspiring state for oneself, then in that moment, like in Lama Tsongkhapa's three principal aspects, where he says, when you have the desire to attain liberation continuously, then in the next step, the way that you've understood it and you desire it for yourself, you switch and you try and generate the same desire or the same wish to be freed from suffering, not just for yourself, but onto other people. So the order that Lama Tsongkhapa has in his three principal aspects, which is renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness, even though after having generated renunciation, it would seem that technically you should exert yourself in trying to understand selflessness. The reason why there is this order where after renunciation then is Lama Tsongkhapa speaks of bodhicitta is because when you've developed the wish for yourself, then you should try and exert yourself at that point to generate bodhicitta, which then these two act as a motivating factor, making emptiness all the more important. So the order generally is that after renunciation, then bodhicitta arises, or great compassion.
Dejin, the Chodi Landi, two in Giri. Derwa. Tanganju Gengi Gongshi Lian Chananzo Hako Koejila. And Chazanga Ninjung Yesi Duzembe, Ninzen Konto Tarba Tunya loss, Somana Shenche, and Tarba said the Karil Migu Yoris, Seduzembe, Nyomon Pella Tarna, Nyambe Lot Samshi Maimba, Nyomon la Taryu Duk, Nyambe Lot Tembuji Kebala, Any nyomo be zawadi dangzin yimbata dangzin te la any chigin seju yoba dangzin di any ko kasore mistaken mind lo tsumi kasota tsu de metumbe lo yimba chi ha kone en dele tarjudu nyambe lo chi ondu shine ngejung gyawres gendini sungurwa.
So one thing also to keep in mind is that when Gela talks about renunciation, he doesn't describe it, or it's not described merely as a wish to attain liberation or the mind that desires or is desirous of liberation, but it rather is a mind that is engaged in understanding or wanting to attain liberation after having understood that what prevents one from attaining liberation are the afflictions, having understood that the afflictions eventually they arise from their root cause, which is ignorance, and having understood that ignorance is a mind that misperceives reality, and therefore it is not concordant in the way it perceives and in the way things really are. And after having understood that this mind is mistaken, that it is misperceiving how things are, and having developed the certainty through reasoning by having understood that if such a misperceiving mind is misperceiving, it can be removed and therefore it is possible to attain liberation. So after having reached the certainty that liberation is possible, then when you focus on liberation with this kind of preparation and then you wish for liberation, then in that moment it's renunciation, not before that.
어디 저랑 디켈레니들 왜 그래?
Yes, it can.
I asked him what is his position, and he stands still with my teacher. Normally we do have two explanations. So this one, my teacher, how he explains, not because only he feels that way, because he also has a lungi jabjan kasir the scriptural support from Gomrim girwa Gomrim re stage for some meditation. Are Gomrim stages of meditation by Kamala Shila. So keep this in your mind. Keep this in your mind. So once you sometimes feel, oh, I have a renunciation, these goosebumps, the hairs just go up. Then you should feel like, okay, I had a nice feeling, but is this feeling has to do something with the real liberation or not? Is this targeting the liberation or not? That we need to remind ourselves. Okay, any other questions? Okay, yeah.
So when someone has renunciation and when their senses come in contact with an object, how do they perceive the object? Do they still perceive it as likable, not likable, neutral?
Likable sidu, yiduom. 당연히 yiduom yon se de cheji 시가로 나마도 베나 yiduom se de 두 스타디오 점be lola chardewo lola tongdewo se geje shiwondu tsembe de korangi ngodi nyela yidu wong se kanda pena chokze tongde nga jo yidu wong tongri se de tsembe chokze koran yingji mu yindo ka geje mabche chokze se de so loli ya azuma sone sharongdu kandedo ji shargu yuna 아주 저때 쪽서 닝지 모두 쪽서 두자도 생년을 기지 마시고 건데 쪽서에 어디냐 기지 시원도 선배 말한 적이다 단다 다외고를 기지 신년도 저기 얘는 쪽서 코랑 가르래 세 저와 땅에 돼 땅도 선배 말한 적이 쪽서기 니로 가르래 쪽서에 내 땅에 간대지네요 오 간대지요래 세 계제디 년도 마시고 봐도 쪽저디 가르소래 나보리 세월이 닝지무시도 미두세 게제디 슈글시에 게제체 년을 쪽저 고란 거 오하래 세디 게제디 간라 게시온 거도 좀베 딩년 땡켜가지 쇠고에디 내가 정매로.
So when you say it looks, what did you say, likable? Likable? I think first it might be more relevant, especially someone who's concerned in trying to understand the view, what likable means in the sense, how do things appear likable or how do they look likable? For instance, if you talk of a table looking likable, when you say it is likable, it kind of suggests that it appears to your mind it's very forthcoming, the way in which it appears to you. But if you were engaged in the view, or you were engaged in an analysis of the view, then before you can start to say it is likable or it is whatever, yellow or big, whatever, however you might qualify it, it seems first that you have to have, it would be helpful first maybe to have an idea of what its way of existing actually is before you can start qualifying or discussing, talking about how it appears likable or unlikable. So that seems to be a little more concerning in terms of understanding how it exists before then you give it all of these qualifications.
다 시기 니주 코랑기 어디 하고서 쇼라 엔티니 분주비기다 나바텔라니 신의 고조제디 지게 소다 약보도 소다 디도세 계지 시원도 잠베 아니 딘데기 이도 공원 계지 시야디 땅아 좀 손에 이도 왕당디 내가 저 군주비 계지 시당들도 왔어.
So if you've understood how it exists, which is its nature, which amounts to being its actual final state, which is its ultimate nature, then once you have that, then from that understanding, then there might be other aspects or other forms it takes, which are then the conventional aspects or the conventional forms or the conventional natures. And within the discussion on whether it is appealing or likable or attractive or not, it has a good shape, pleasant shape. In that moment, you have now gone into the domain of talking about its conventional natures after having understood what it actually is.
제장하다 니 단지 고랑 저번에 니중계 잡실라 그러라. 리나운스션 슈글라 말베. 봐. 다 제장가 단지 리나운스션 기야디 아니 아주 방송에 콜에 된되면도스. 코웨기 시두점백 아니 베나 가사냐마 갱기 지난주에 걸로 남았나시 아니 레다 녀모비 샤완진 세기 삼로당당 대체 아니 동행기 동행 아마니기 땡치기도 세기 시디기 톤에 데네파 타르고도 냠벨론 끼원도 잠베 아니 랑신 최 컨트리지레 통바이나양 아니 얘기 통야디 지기 인도하고지 코랑원에 통원도데 코랑기 뇌에 인도하고서 자원이네 민도데 이나양 아니 뜻을 뜬중고 돈에 약보다 도저히 시에고도 와 세도 선배 이 신이 아주마선에 역도 계제 시에서지 여버데 당동양 가르쳐 그래 시 니주리야고 몽매비 인상 안텔라데니 아주마선에 다 le saya tang ani pigile ya tajik do pigi shiv dembazin royati me wando zambe ani nga jogi yidu wong tong me tong se di nam sha gyundu gi nga jo yidu wong me tong tang da to zama ra chi chagi giris.
So if you consider someone who's developed renunciation, and you're talking about renunciation in the actual way of renunciation, where you have understood that the source of suffering is the afflictions, and it is the actions and the karma that you have accumulated from those afflictions, and then when you check further, you're able to trace it to a notion of believing in things to exist in a certain determinate manner, which then you come to realize is not true. When all of that happens, and you have a clear understanding of how it really is, so you have not only familiarity, but you're also certain about how things really exist, and so you've ascertained the actual way of existing, the ultimate nature. In that moment, they may still appear, or they may still have an aspect of being likable or unlikable, attractive, unattractive. But because you are no longer kept away from, or you're not, its actual way of existing is no longer hidden to you, while knowing its ultimate nature, even though it may appear as likable or pleasant or attractive, you realize that that nature that it manifests is something that is posited in dependence on a series of factors, or dependent even on other things. And so, even though it may appear as likable, or it may appear as attractive or pleasant, the way in which you're seeing it is very different from how you saw it before having understood its actual nature. And so, when you have genuine renunciation, in the way that Genla had mentioned the other day, where you have gone through the steps and you've understood what is the source of suffering, that ignorance is the cause of the later kinds of suffering, what ignorance is, whether it is accurate or not, whether it's removable, and then you develop renunciation. You're familiar with the nature of things, at which point the way in which they may appear attractive or pleasant is very different from someone who is unfamiliar with this and things appear attractive or not to them. So it may still appear attractive and likable, but there's like a huge difference in the way in which it appears attractive.
Pena yidu wonga yomare se kiji de penyora chabuji bata. Pena ranzo rangi. So I will speak a little bit in English. So I'll attractive survey. Rebe yidu wonga namju karaji pleasant. Yeah.
Is it pleasant in English? Attractive? What is it? How do we say? Things look pleasant, attractive, appealing. What? What do we say? Appealing? Attractive? Huh?
Desirable.
Desirable.
Pleasant.
Pleasant?
Yiduong sidu sambe.
Yiduong in Tibetan just means like it looks, like your mind goes towards it. That's literally what it means. So I think appealing might be literally like it appeals.
Yeah.
I think that is most accurate.
Appealing sin yadwa.
Mahendwash.
So I think our attachment becomes very strong when we have a strong kind of a object or base that attractive. 니가 냠들어요. 그래. Appealing. 알레. Appealing. So when you while we are strong having this emotion attachment, then it is not the reason, because from the object side you feel it's appealing, but deep inside in our mind to that attachment, just holding to this kind of thesis, your position, saying this beautiful, this appealing is from its own side, intrinsically. And there you say, if I have this, I will be happy. If I don't have that, I will be very sad. Like a small child crying for ice cream. I need this ice cream, and then if you give him a doll, or if you give him some other kind of toys, he does not want that. He wants only ice cream, because intrinsically the child has a belief, or I don't know, clinging. There it is. This is so good from there. So it's not because the Buddha, when he sees, or the Arhat, it's appealing, it's good, it's bad, it's there. But they don't have, because that they have a strong renunciation, and they have a strong influence of the practice of emptiness or the selflessness. When they see this appealing, but still they don't have this strong, intrinsically the appealing from its own. Sorry, its own, yeah. And that we need to remember. We need to, when we person who says that I really wanted to practice emptiness, selflessness, then we really need to check whether do you have this feeling to take out this intrinsically appealing from its own. That is my kind of a trap, as I'm a prey, and this is my trap. And then every time I fall into this kind of pit, it is so hard to get out from there. So maybe like this, with this feeling, then going, and now sorry for my long answer. Coming back to your question, the person who has a strong renunciation, especially my teacher's way of understanding of renunciation, and then that person, when he sees something appealing, attractive, he sees the attractive, but he will never burn his, I don't know, what is the limited English. 제가 타지도 고랑기 뇌에 아니 이도 공화지도 샤야메스도 선배 아니 텔레 템베기 어느 초와 동행 방되는 게메 뜻 세우시고 차로 왔어.
Because the thing doesn't look entirely attractive or unattractive in a kind of objective sense, where the thing itself, by itself through its own nature, possesses those qualities, all the resultant suffering or happiness or whatever results from that kind of conviction that things possess these qualities in and of themselves, objectively, all that resultant suffering and all those resultant emotional states just don't arise.
Then seeing the attractive, not attractive, enjoying all this thing, but not having this intrinsically feeling attached to this, and then enjoying this new style of living, feeling. And if you say, day and night, may I can have this kind of life, don't you feel this is something that we really want? Otherwise, saying like, day and night, may I get liberation, not having any understanding the what to let go, what to hold to, and then saying, I think we are not going to buy this stuff from the depth of our heart, but we might repeat after some words, and then say, yeah, okay, this sounds good. So then I give this example. Person with the attachment, person without attachment, going into a momo shop and then enjoying momo. Both are enjoying. If somebody says that person without attachment going there momo and he's not enjoying, and I'm not going to become that person. But because the reality is momo can be tasty. If you become someone that says like, momo is not tasty, I don't like the taste of momo, what is momo? And then that becomes so big confusion for me. I'm already confused. I don't want to get more confused. So, what are the significance of person without attachment and person with attachment goes into the momo shop, and they both start enjoying momo, and then still the one person has one significant, remarkable quality, and then other maybe with clinking to the momo. What are the two differences? Then you really wanted to know about that. Okay, so now the next question.
Rinpoche, so does that mean that in order to realize renunciation, one needs to first develop the view?
What develop what?
To realize the view that sees the emptiness of...
Ask this guy. I'm kind of in the middle, because the way my teacher makes this position, it has so much benefit. Because I always feel like if we don't see a hope, and then jumping out from a ship, even it's sinking, I wanted to stay few more minutes. But if I can see this island of the hope, then people saying this is suffering, this is sinking, and now you need to go. Of course, then I will, even I don't know how to swim, I will jump. Then it becomes quite complicated here a little bit, because what kind of a view we are talking about? Because the 4 schools offers different types of menu. So, and then to be honest, which is suitable for me, then I need to really check. I need to be very careful, because even Buddha says the Prasangika school is the best, and then it is not a kind of suitable to just go for the best unless you feel it is necessary. Because we do so many things, even even you don't feel necessary, but because just saying I like it. And then most of us feeling like I'm on Mahayana path, especially Prasankika path, because I like it. But not much feeling is there. But once you feel it's necessary, and then you will always think, is this path suitable for me or not? And then you will care about all other debates that through even accepting what are the some struggle points, even I feel like I like Prasangika school, but I feel these and these really bothering me. So then Buddha taught all the four schools to be too gentle on yourself, to go through step by step. Then now the biggest question is, even I feel like maybe Swatantrika, I feel like so connected. And then somebody tells me, no, the Prasankika, you need to jump onto the Prasankika boat. And then I feel strongly there. And then I would say, no, this is the right view. And then it will hurt me, saying like Adisha and my teacher going like, no, you are not wrong boat. But I feel this is much safer for me. That's why I think Denganjugi tanda shunalola ni chance tikasore uma tinju lo shishane ani ranjubi ngorju wada semzame ngorju ani chanju samba yoda mesedi shungmangbojinan yo songdegro.
In the texts, there's often you hear this thing which is said that from the perspective of a Prasangika, or from a Prasangika perspective, are there any bodhisattvas who are svatantrikas or yogacharas? And the answer is often yes.
In the end, it hurts me, Adisha saying there's no. Bad news for the other schools. But the most beautiful part here is, it is never a discussion about school. It is discussion about, is there a way out? So if it is like, if you feel like I'm in this group, like a Prasankika group, Prasankika party, and this party, and then there's a problem. But then it is about, I can feel there is a liberation, even the Swatantrika school. But then the more feeling is not because the Prasankika, the Swatantrika is the best. It is necessary that you feel this is, I can achieve it. Then and then my teacher or Adisha looking at me, oh, he's on that. Good for him, he has this kind of renunciation, but we don't call this as renunciation. actual one. And that isn't my biggest concern at the moment. It should be more like, this is what I feel the most comfortable with. And my ambition is the liberation. That is my position. And whenever the Adisha will say, oh, even you feel this, your view is the best, but then my interest is, even though you feel this, your view is the suitable, suitable, but it is not suitable because it does not can remove the inflection, because still that mibal had it was said
Object.
the object is left. That's the debate. But I'm saying no, that doesn't matter. But then you need to prove that even there's an object left, then there is still grasping very strongly there. And if you think my school is the best and then Prasangika school is not the right school, and then even they start talking about it, you make this kind of a criticism. But you feel like I'm doing very good, but then still you feel like there's awareness whether I feel like there's no more grasping coming, but then you wanted to be careful, this kind of approach, and then you just kind of a very unbiasedly, right? Listen to the conversation, what the Prasangika has to offer, and then you wanted to listen very carefully, saying like, even they say this, it is hard to digest, but still it is down to my business. Now I need to look into this. So this part you will learn more on the third year, more on the third year. Right now you need to answer no pervasion. There's a pervasion, no pervasion. Okay, the one. Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to know a little bit about self-grasping ignorance. Because everything that we perceive, we learn, it is subjective, it is from the I. And, like, what is the practical way of loosening the grip to this I? Or is it even needed? Why should I loosen the grip to this I? And it says self-grasping ignorance. So if it's not grasping, maybe it's not ignorance. So, and like this I, like that we're trying to get rid of, like, is this my enemy or is this my friend? Like, how does this work?
당부디 가르사 당부디 다 다도 진 제제제제제 진바들 해봐세디 또 다도 진비 등진세디 samlo nyele ya da do zimbo zamshiki dangzin slabyo marwa da zin se du jambe da ranzo gi zindan de lo tundung ne ko tunda tumbi to ne zingudu tunda ma tumbi zingudu se tunda ma tungu ne zinsha se dangzin spalab shebso.
I think I translated, I thought I understood 3 things from what you were saying. If there's not complete, then say. One was, when you use the word self-grasping, there is a grasping at a self, that's how it's explained. But it doesn't mean that, like you said, if you stop grasping, so when you say self-grasping, it doesn't mean that there's a self which you are grasping at. That's not the entire meaning of self-grasping. Self-grasping, so when you're checking whether it is self-grasping or not, then are you grasping at the self in a manner that corresponds with how it exists or not? That's what you're checking for. So what we are using to translate as self-grasping, or what is being referred to when you say self-grasping, is not merely a state of grasping at a self, but it is grasping at a way of existing of that self which doesn't correspond with how it actually is. So it's grasping at an inconsistent nature for this self. That's self-grasping. So it's an invalid mind, because the way it apprehends this self or grasps this self doesn't correspond with how it is. That's what we mean by self-grasping.
dilheba sedro dalheba sedu zambe ko ranzo gi namsha jundu samla dan chi le ya ani migwal hyo gore sedu zambe migwal samla ma dan du hlo sha ke je ju res di da anzu tangbo shebe ina da jerum chi gi dang ani da ji kiru ni den gi da be ji gejen tam mang bu gi ani 지금 미국에 sem 마샤바지도 정말 흘려대 대바 잠실라 당진 매버 쇠투에기 계제지 여러선 자원이는 요 말이스 립 쇠발라 배나 전주 셈의 동 전주 셈의 니중의 자침벌이 콘솔라양 디 자침벌 셈 딘들라양 아니 당진 매버 쇠기 니와 매비 좀 생각하서는 당진의 진당 오수 집에 로미도 스네 뒷다
So that the way you worded it, which is actually very beautiful, because you're not grasping. So if you stop grasping at it, kind of, if you let the grasping go, so you don't focus on it almost, or you don't bring it to mind, therefore you're not grasping, there's no active grasping at it. Is that a solution or an antidote? And many, almost unanimously, the response to that is just not bringing it to mind, or finding a way to kind of relax or loosen the grasping at the self, which you can do in different ways by not bringing it to mind or focusing on other things, such as compassion or loving kindness or whatever it might be. There's almost across the board a consensus that these are not sufficient ways to actually remove self-grasping, because the idea of self-grasping is not just the action of grasping that's problematic, it's grasping at a nature which doesn't correspond with how it really is. So the only antidote that you can speak of when you speak of an antidote of self-grasping is a mind that is actively perceiving the opposite or the direct contradictory nature of how self-grasping perceives its object. That's across the board that is explained to be the only way that you can get rid of self-grasping.
제장가 단다 람름 치면나로라 제르부치기 아니 단다 야나 하샹기 따와지마 껴난체 야나 하샹기 따와들이야 아니 가야 지금 상로마당도 스테이지 아니 샘틀려 샤네 아니 트와토베 기지 시그도스 디 아니 단다 미게 디기나로라 가자 단다 아주 샤마를 람림기 나로라 마 양콩지 마 껴나지 아니 람림나라 디데송 샤주디 아니 롱지 마 좀된디 롱지 마 당나지 니 딜로 콩네스 니 딜라 삼네 세체 니 딜라 삼네 엔예기 지란줄라 지가소리 미신 라마땡고레 미시엔 되는 냥고를 로바 쳐고를 퇴바 쳐고를 세디 니 딜러 삼니 아니 시유스 디 공장나도 와.
So, in the Lamrim, where Lama Tsongkhapa was talking about it, he brings the view of this Chinese master Hashang. And in the view of the Chinese master Hashang, Lama Tsongkhapa says, the view of the Chinese master Hashang was to say that if you were to not bring anything to mind, and therefore remain in this state of a kind of relaxed, objectless state, this has been explained by the Chinese master Hashang as a path to attain liberation. But then that's not accepted. In the Shamar Lamrim, which is a commentary to Lama Tsongkhapa's text, then there is the author then makes another further quote here saying, citing from the sutras, where the Buddha says it is in relation to this, or it is kind of in oh, it is with this in mind that I have said you have to rely on someone else, you have to rely on a spiritual teacher, you have to rely on a guide, keeping this fact in mind.
Otherwise, the Hashang's way of explaining the sorry zimbig logic zindena yakpo inere duja inere 아니 지 배샤지 기가베 소자네 차야레 기나고 소자나 차야레스 제상가 기나고도 가본 이게 졸르지요 말슬나시 또가 튼튼이네 되면 깨제미두스 또가 그렇게 주지요 말했어요.
So the reason for this thing of relying on other people, the reason why it's being said is because Hashang, the way he describes it, Hashang's explanation seems to center around the understanding that whatever state of mind it might be, whatever state of grasping, staying with the word grasping, whatever you might be grasping at is equally problematic. And the example that is often used is whether you get bit by a white dog or you get bit by a black dog, they're both going to hurt equally. So whether you have a positive form of grasping or you have a negative form of grasping, as long as there is an element of grasping in your mind, then that is problematic and it's an obstacle to attain liberation, or it's an obstacle to generate wisdom. So it is this view that Hashang gives to counter this view that Hashang gives is why that quotation from the sutra has been given.
다디 다르니를 시도좀 베타 다디리아 아니 단다 우마주베나신 우마주베나로라 아니 미게 당고카도라 아니 다 닝우진나체 아니 당보디 다 우진체단디 녜기 뇨모 도숨 가정을 란주기다 뇨모 기샤비 견당 아니 뇨모단데도 참마 계사기 시디 알아 타직도 랑은의 요바 통지 아니 다 딘디 진당한테 노벌 텔레 때니 아니 예 차소니 모두수 계샤세 차 최니 용도 잠베 딘디게 다데 예 다인스 다 아니 딘디기 코랑기 뇌네 요바 잠베게 로 텔레 셴베 아니 미베다 세두 잠베 아니 풍불 때네 따와 잠시기 다 세텔레 때니 아니 얘기 가서고리 소사 집정당 아니 고발에 타르바 치인디에 다디기 시기도 딘데게 다디 얘기 녜스.
So the other one that you said, is it a friend or is it an enemy? In the entering the middle way, Chandrakirti, towards the later section, he talks of two ways of speaking of a self, and there is one self that acts as the base or is the self that is perceived to be objectively existent. And so that objectively existent self, which when perceived leads to the generation of attachment, ignorance, pride, and all the host of problems and all the host of afflictions, and therefore it keeps you trapped. That self, that objectively existent self, which is the source of all that one is an enemy. But in the absence of that self, when you realize that that's not how it is, and that there is another self, which is the one that is dependent and it relies on the aggregates or is dependent on the aggregates, then that's the self through which then you can accumulate certain causes and experience certain results. That's the self that can engage in practice. That's the self that can be cultivated. And that's the self that cultivates the path, through which then that self attains liberation. So this self is, of course, a friend.
True version of you. Okay.
Was that, Pooja, is that the whole thing? Yeah? Yeah?
Okay. So we stop here.